Hi, everyone. My guest today is Prairie Conlon. She's a licensed mental health professional, and she is a therapist that utilizes animal-assisted interventions in all walks of her mental health practice. She has her master's degree in professional counseling and a postgraduate degree in military behavioral health counseling. She's a certified equine-assisted therapist and has presented at national conferences on her techniques for providing equine therapy for military members and their families, with special emphasis on transitioning from the military back to civilian life. She's taking over our incredible The Animal Effect show. I'm so excited about that and excited for you to get to know her. Thanks for joining us. I'm not the house of cards that falls down easily. I'm strong enough to handle what you throw at me. Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I'm your host, Kristin and Walker. Just what are we going to discuss? The intimacy that is mental health. Let's continue to make it as comfortable as discussing brain health or heart health. This show has been on the air for several years, and we have amazing co-hosts. And then we created a network of podcasters on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com, a place where every possible facet of mental well-being can be talked about openly. My show, after several hundred interviews, the format is this: intimate, deep, funny, touching, sometimes uncomfortable, but always vulnerable conversations with interesting people. The goal is to have you, our listening family, many of you who have become my good friends, feel as though you are listening in on private conversations. Thank you for tuning in and becoming part of this amazing journey with me, and now with our network of podcasters. Just knowing this podcast might be helping any of you realize you are not alone on this journey called being a human being makes doing this podcast worth every second. After all we promised, we'd be cordial. Hey everyone, I have got a special guest today who is a new podcaster on the network. Her name is Prairie Conlon, and she is an animal person, as you just heard. And we have been wanting someone to take over. Probably don't tell any of the other podcasters, but my favorite show on the network is The Animal Effect. If I could do that show every day, I would, but I just don't have time. So I found someone even better than me to take it over. Prairie, thank you so much for joining us and for doing this show.
I am absolutely thrilled about this. This is just so exciting and a topic near and dear to my heart as well. So very, very excited to be here.
Now, I gave everybody, a very short highlight reel of who you are and what you do, but I want them to hear it from you. So, and we'll get into, more things as we go, but can you give everybody just the favorite parts about what you do and why you have animals as such a big part of your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I've just been surrounded by animals my entire life. I grew up on a cattle ranch, and we had everything, big, small. And then as I got older, into high school, I started working at a veterinary clinic. And of course, all of the animals that nobody wanted or dropped off, I brought home. So thankful to my parents for allowing me to do that.
Yeah, I know. Great parents. And listen, when she says she's big and small, I've seen her, these stunning, should be in like Sports Illustrated or Equine Mastery magazine or whatever, of her on horses roping cattle. And so when she says large and small, she's not kidding.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, so blessed to have that growing up, and, had originally wanted to go to veterinarian school, but, things change, and really took an interest in the psychology world. And then as soon as I figured out you can combine the two, I mean, that was it for me.
Wow.
And so, I've made a career with it. I did my internship at a place called Horses That Heal in North Carolina, right out of my graduate degree. And, we had horses there, and it was amazing to me to understand I can practice psychology and mental health therapy in a horse arena. I was like, this is the greatest job ever.
That's so amazing.
And kind of took it from there, with the horses, because the thing is out in the arena, there's all of the other things are included in it. There's the nature therapy, there's there's the barn cats every once in a while would make an appearance. You have the stable dogs and everything. So you just get all of it. And I realized that every animal has their place in that. And so really have just kind of grown with that and brought it to my practice. And that's basically animal assisted interventions are what I do.
I love it. That's, this is why I got into having therapy dogs, because I always have to have a dog or two or more attached to my person. And whether they like it or not, darn it. And I loved doing, therapy dog work in psych hospitals. And there was just so many ways that I witnessed animals helping people open up, have moments of peace in an otherwise unpeaceful life that's going on inside of their head. So I did the same thing. I figured out what way I could bring animals into my life and have it be a part of my work experience too. And when I was doing this was well before, I think I had to give a kidney and hair follicles and things like that to get my dog approved to work at a hospital. And now, of course, you can do that really easy. So for you doing this, as long as you have, and I'm not aging you, you're probably younger than I am, but you definitely were doing this before it became as popular as it is today. So how was that for you? Did you notice that, or, how have you noticed a change in that?
Yeah, I think that, the biggest thing was, it was always considered an alternative therapy. And it still is. But I think really what's changed is not so much the fact that people, animal assisted interventions have always worked, but the fact that people are looking for more natural and holistic forms of treatment. Everybody's there's a big movement towards the yoga, the meditation, the mindfulness practices. This goes right alongside with all of those things. And I think that's really been the biggest change, is just more of a change in our society saying, hey, we need to figure out something a little bit more natural instead of, contributing to some of the prescription crisis that's been going on. So,
right. And often, people that, like my ex-husband as an example, who did, he had pain pills shoved down his throat as a teenager because he was in sports and so on. And this is long before society really knew that that was not a good thing to do. We created addicts out of it. So what's amazing is how much working with animals, specifically horses, helps people in their recovery from substance abuse.
absolutely, absolutely. I love the equine assisted psychotherapy work. I just have, I've seen incredible change in people, especially with the combat soldiers. The military is very near and dear to my heart. My grandfather served in the Korean War, and my husband did 11 years, and he just recently got out of the Army. And my younger sister as well, she served in the Army and just recently got out. So knowing how hard those transitions are for military as well, for special needs and disabilities, for addiction, the equine assisted psychotherapy is just a wonderful, wonderful alternative as opposed to the traditional therapy sitting in an office. A lot of times that can make people uncomfortable, especially, you're thinking about your combat veterans,
Right.
putting them in a box.
Right.
That doesn't work very well. So kind of getting out and having more of an experience, because that's basically, I think, the basis of why it works so well is it's experiential in nature. You're connecting the mind and the body.
Yes, exactly. That's the thing that I noticed about doing the equine therapy part for myself was, um, I couldn't even explain what happened. I still have a hard time explaining what happened. And when people say, well, what do they do? I say, well, I can give you kind of a play by play on what they do, but it's unique to each person that, that goes out there. And what happened for me was such an internal shift that required almost no verbiage, that it became, it's, still difficult to explain since there were no words needed for what I experienced.
Absolutely. And that's the thing is, where we are today as a society, we are so up in our heads. We're in our iPads, we're in our phones. And that's, just super left brain and right brain. You're not engaging both. And so with the horses, I like it. And even with the dogs, with the cats, anything, I mean, just the simple act of petting your dog or petting your cat, that is experiential. But the big thing is that we have the verbally accessible memories, which we're using right now, to have a conversation. And then we have our sensory accessible memories. And those are really hard to work in. That's where PTSD lives. And our sensory accessible memories, to make it, the easiest way to explain that is, if we hear a song on the radio and all of a sudden we're transported to a certain time, or we have a certain smell or something and we're transported to a certain time, even if it's a good or even if it's a bad memory, we go there. And that's how PTSD works. And that's how a lot of these sensory memories work. And the thing is it's really hard to access those. When we are in an arena with a horse and we're having an experience and all of our senses are heightened, we're starting to tap into that right brain sensory memories. And then we're able to actually work in them. And so that's why it's less verbiage, but more of a feeling, like you were talking about. I have had clients so many times say that exact same thing that you did. I don't really know what happened, but it was an experience. It was a sensation that was really moving for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And when you try to, tell someone you should do this, this would be really good for you. It makes it difficult to sort of sell that service, because when you tell them, well, I can't really tell you how good it's going to be for you, just trust me. And they hear therapy and they get kind of freaked out. I think one of the big things too is when you're working with horses, a lot of the time, it's not about riding the horse. Because I've had people say, well, I'm not going to get on a horse. And I tell them, well, you don't really do that with equine therapy. And they don't understand, well, what would I do with it then? And I'm like, oh, you have no idea. It's amazing.
Yeah. And one thing that's always surprised me is, one of the horses that I use, I've had her for 16 years at this point. I was there when she was born, and you'd think I would know every single one of her behaviors, but she surprises me all the time by reacting differently to people. And having different behaviors that a lot of times I don't even know what's going on, but the person I'm working with will say, that was amazing. The horse did exactly what I needed it to do.
So Prairie, in your work with horses, we're going to talk about many things, but there's something about that experiential piece that people notice when they're working with an animal that maybe, like you just said, you don't quite know what's going on, but the person knows that something just happened. And I've had this when I've talked to different animal communicators, which people believe in that or they don't, but they always talk about how animals will send you messages in pictures visually. And that's kind of what I have experienced, and also what I've heard about with people working, especially with horses in a therapeutic setting, where they don't even need to tell a horse, I want you to do this. They just think it and kind of picture it, and then the horse just does it, and they can't explain how that just happened.
Right. And what's really neat is, that, because that's the power of intention. And a lot of times we're not in tune with what our intentions are. We're not synced up and motivated towards what we have planned for ourselves and our intentions. And that's something that's, a really big thing that I see happen as well in the arena is people start to get in tune with that and in sync. And then the animal starts moving in that way. And it is very, very different than doing anything with a dog or with a cat, just because they're very different types of animals. A horse is a prey animal, and the dog is a predator. And so the horse is a lot more mindful of their surroundings, and they're always scanning the environment. They're always scanning you, especially if you're in their environment. And so they're very, very in tune with that. And so when they start moving with a person or alongside them, it's really, really impactful for that person. And again, it's one of those things that even as a therapist, sometimes I really want to ask. I'm like, oh my gosh, what just happened there? I saw a switch. I saw a change. And I really, really want to know. But, that's what's pretty different about the equine therapy and great for clients too, if they're not really big on wanting to talk about it, which, happens a lot with the combat soldiers as well. They don't really want to go into it, but they're having a shift,
right,
without having to have that verbal discussion and relive it and talk about it.
Tell us a little bit about your journey with, I mean, you've been in documentaries, you've worked with Montel Williams, you've done some really interesting things as I was reading about you. So can you tell our listeners and your future listeners, what that is all about?
Yeah, so that journey, it started a couple years ago when my husband got out of the military, and as a military spouse, it's hard to nail down a job, because it's hard to interview and say, we might leave in 9 months.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
nobody wants to spend time with you there, and it's especially difficult as a clinician. I mean, you have state to state licensure, getting licensure transferred, and getting your practice started. And as a therapist, that's what makes you successful, is having a client base. And how, I mean, it was really frustrating, because I'm thinking, how am I going to have a client base when I'm moving around? We don't really know where we're going to end up again. We want to make sure that we're in a place with a good place, good school for the kids and stuff like that. And so it might be a while before we figure out where we're going to end up. And plus, I was leaving the horses that heal, which I loved that place. I mean, who doesn't
Yeah,
love going to a horse stable every
I know,
getting to do what
exactly.
you do? And so I'm going, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And I mean, I started getting really intentional in my, like my daily meditations. And it was 3 weeks, and I ran into this company called CertaPet. And I had already known that I wanted to do online therapy, because I was like, I have some clients here that I need to keep in touch with.
Yeah.
And so what I was doing was just looking for online therapy jobs to, somebody that had already done it. I'd done a lot of research, kind of setting up my own private practice for online. And when I ran into this online company and it had the word pet in it, I'm going, okay, this is
Yeah,
interesting.
you really
And
researched
it
to
started
dig
talking
out and
about,
find that.
yeah. And so I reached out and got linked up with them, and it was basically it's a company that does telehealth, just like a BetterHelp or Talkspace, but with the animal assisted interventions being at the forefront of what they do. So the therapists there have to have a background in like the animal assisted therapy and understanding how that can help. And so developing treatment plans for clients that might include like an emotional support animal. I recommend a lot of clients for certain kinds of trauma work or equine therapy. And so developing these treatment plans for clients. And so I really kind of started researching more and more about what emotional support animals are, how that can be helpful as well, because I'd already done all the other kinds of things. I'd done the equine assisted psychotherapy. I had therapy dogs in office. I've done nature therapy, wilderness therapy, the walk and talk. And then the emotional support animals, I knew about it, but I was like, well, this is pretty great too. And the more I got into it, I was like, this is fantastic, because it's a consistent daily form of treatment that keeps you accountable, more so than some other forms of treatment. And so started kind of developing, just because there's not a lot of information out there right now about emotional support animals. So started developing my own type of treatment using your emotional support animal, some protocols with panic attacks, protocols for helping with sleep using your animal.
Wow.
So really kind of started developing that. And then, CertaPet really got behind me and eventually brought me on as their clinical director. And so we've been, working and shaping things and trying to help with legislation. And, that's kind of how I got invited to do some shows, got to work with Montel and have done some documentaries and just to talk about this, because it's a relatively new thing, emotional support animals, and but it's a highly effective treatment. But right now, the lack of regulation and everything on it is the problem that we're seeing, like peacocks going to airports. So.
Right. Or somebody bringing an emu. And I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work. I did see someone and the duck was awesome. Okay. So the duck did nothing. I never even heard the duck, but it was really trippy to be sitting on an airplane and see a duck walk by my seat. And it was an emotional support duck. It was wearing a little diaper, but it was completely quiet, no fuss, no muss. It was so interesting though. Is that
wow.
a duck?
So you were actually on a flight
Yep.
with a duck.
And then later,
wow.
I didn't get a picture of it because I was just shocked. But I got home and then in the news, the biggest story trending on Yahoo was emotional support duck got on a flight in Asheville, North Carolina. And I was like, I was on that flight. So yeah, it didn't even quack. So,
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, I think what's interesting with emotional support animals, I know how, invaluable they are. That's what they are. That's what they are for people, even if you don't think that that's what they are. They really are. In the way I see it, people will say, oh, are they yours? And I'm not trying to correct them, but I don't think of animals that way. I think I'm theirs. They came here to help me with my stuff of being a human. It's my job to help them do that job. But I know I come at it from a different place because I always, have been around animals where they were some kind of therapy for somebody. But what's interesting to me is, so we have people having emotional support animals, and these are not dog trainers. These are not certified pet therapists or anything like that. These are just people who have some kind of trauma, if it's a disability, then it's, a service dog, but they're I think that's what's gotten some people into trouble, is because the animal is there for them, but that person is not trained to deal with this animal in terms of how they react to the public. And so there can be some issues around, how the animal does react to the public and how that person, because I'm talking about a specific situation where someone had a wonderful dog. Another person and their kids would not leave this dog alone, even though the person was saying, this is not a dog for you to play with. It was closed quarters. I think they were on a bus or a train. It wasn't a flight, but it was something like that. So people would not leave the dog alone and reaching under the seat and pulling its tail. And the dog ended up biting someone, not bad, but bit them. And then it was this huge deal. It was in the news. This person's awful. We can't have these people abusing the system, blah, 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 blah. And that wasn't the situation. And this person was someone who was in the military, severe PTSD, was their emotional support animal, and they didn't know how to handle the situation. Well, they weren't trained to. This dog is there for their emotional support. So I feel like there needs to be some education to the public around, listen, wake up, you know what I'm saying. What's your response to that piece?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is actually, the biggest thing that I have been, pushing for is the public education. I mean, there's several things that need to happen. There needs to be some sort of a training system for, number one, the doctors and the therapists that are doing this. I'm currently working on that and hoping to have that out pretty soon and submit it for a CEU. But I think it's really important that if we are going to actually be, prescribing an animal for them, we need to talk to them and educate the client about what an emotional support animal is, where it can go, what kind of privileges it has. Because if we're not, then there, a lot of people they might take their animal into a place they shouldn't.
Right.
And the thing is there are laws right now that if you have a quote unquote fake emotional support animal, you can be fined for up to $1,000 and get a criminal charge.
Yeah.
Now, my issue with that though is, how are these people that are looking for a service that might have a mental illness to know what is right, what is wrong?
Exactly. It's exactly.
So we're going to punish them. We're going to make their mental health symptoms worse by giving them a misdemeanor charge and $1,000 fee because they didn't know where to seek treatment. They went online and they found a letter and just printed it off, or paid $50 for a letter somewhere. But we're going to punish them. That's the other piece of it, is I think that for public education as well, we need to make sure that we're vetting companies that are doing this.
Exactly. Go to
And
the companies that print this stuff out and say, I mean, they're so blatant because there's no recourse. There's nothing criminal about what they're doing. They'll say, hey, right on the website, print this out and you'll get on any flight you want to. I mean, they're saying this is not legal, but they're not going to get in trouble for that.
Yeah. And it's been really frustrating, working with this company, CertaPet, that's completely legitimate, that does it the right way, where we have connections with clients. Like at this point, I just absolutely love it. I've had clients at this point for almost up to 4 years. I love, seeing their growth through having their animal and everything. But other companies looking to make a quick buck have replicated that with fake therapists or fake doctors that nobody talks to. And hey, for, $50, you can print this off. And so this person that might actually have a mental disability is walking around with a fake letter, and they're the one that is going to get in trouble. Right. That just doesn't seem right to me.
I know there's so much that needs to be done, which is why it's so great that you're championing this. I mean, there's so much that needs to be done. And of course there are people that abuse the system, but I think part of it too is that bystander discussions or bystander support or awareness, where I've heard people, and I am not that person that, is call them out Charlie. I do not go around being the school marm in every situation. You shouldn't be doing that. But I have very artfully figured out a way to say to people without shaming them when they brag about, oh yeah, well, just get that vest and you don't have to. I have found a way to say, would you not do that? Because it really does harm the people that da. And I've had really good results from doing that, just making people aware. So, it starts with the rest of us too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree with that approach, just because, it really, and I'm the same way. I normally wouldn't go around calling anybody out, but I have a lot of clients at this point that just have benefited so much that it's just, it feels like a crime not to say anything and say, hey, I'm not going to scold you, but maybe you need to rethink that, because man, there's people that are benefiting from this, and we're getting to a point now where people are trying to make it go away completely. And I think, limiting any kind of intervention that helps, I just think that would be a tragedy.
Absolutely.
Especially with the mental health crisis that we have going on at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. The more that we, thank goodness, I started in podcasting a long time ago when people were still like, what is that? And I hope that I've made at least a little dent in awareness around mental health. And I know when I'm out in public that it's the conversations I hear from people outside of the field are very different and much more accepting than they were 8 years ago. And also with animals, it's going an unfortunate place because of abuse of the system, and also a lack of understanding and what we're talking about, a lack of, proper rules and regulations around it. But I like the fact that, it's just a known that hospitals are going to have therapy dogs, that it's a known that you're going to have this kind of situation happening, and that this is a regular part of a therapeutic process. I do like that. And I like the fact that when I started taking my dogs to conferences to talk to mental health professionals to convince them what a good idea it was to use them, and they, almost wouldn't let me come. I like the fact that now every flipping conference I see has someone there or talking about it. So Prairie, let's talk a little bit about what you want to do with this show. I mean, I get it that you're going to do a lot of awareness around this, but what thoughts have you had around the animal effect and keeping that name and utilizing it, just so my listeners and your listeners know what they can expect when they're tuning into your show? Which, listeners of my show, I'm not kidding, you don't listen to my show if you don't like animals. So listen to the show. It's The Animal Effect. You can get it on iTunes, Stitcher, and so on. Tell our listeners, what you're wanting to do with this.
So I want to explore every aspect of the effects that animals can have on us. I mean, the pet industry is a $1 billion industry here. And so we're not spending that kind of money and doing the things that we do for our animals just on a whim. There is something to it. There's absolutely something to it. And so, I mean, I'm going to go, like I said in my intro, from the bizarre to the ordinary. I mean, we're going to do some goat yoga. I've never done that before, and I'm really interested in it. I'm not a big goat fan, but we're gonna check it out. Yes, they are interesting. Well, I feel like they're kind of like cats. You know how they can kind of just look at you and see you, and you're like, I don't know what's going on right there, but
I feel cloven hoof.
Vulnerable.
It's the cloven hoof. 1 foot in hell and 1 in heaven. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And cats are sociopaths half the time, in my opinion. But they just don't they don't like me. I want to ask you about this, and then we'll go back to the other. Cats, you tell me if you think this is true. I love any animal. Like I love lizards. I love snakes. I love dogs, cats, whatever. I'm not into bugs. Get away from me with that. But I love creatures. So cats either love me or they freaking hate me. And I have literally had cats like try to leap through screens in houses to come at me.
Oh, wow.
It's been, and I've done nothing to, and I had a friend of mine said, Kristin, it's because you're such an alpha. And, I'm definitely was born like a pack leader. That's like my personality with dogs. That's why I totally have never had an issue with dogs. I get them. But she said, cats are natural alphas. And so you get a real alpha cat and they're just like, I don't think so. And I said, well, that's interesting, but I want to ask a professional question. What do you think about that? Is that completely ridiculous?
No. And honestly, I think it needs to be prefaced with the fact that, and this is just my professional opinion on this, but when everybody says the domesticated cat, that makes me laugh because cats are not domesticated.
Yeah.
I don't care how much they like being around you and everything. I mean, they are not domesticated. I've had a theory that, well, I have several theories about cats, but I'll get into them maybe at a later show. But one of them is if the apocalypse came, I think that the cats would outlive everything and everybody. They're savvy and they're kind of scary.
Yeah.
And they know, I swear they just they look at your soul when they look at you.
Yeah.
We have a cat and he's a great cat. We've had him for 9 years. We've actually, brought him from post to post with us. And he's actually outside my window right now, tormenting a squirrel. So if you hear little barking in the background, that's a squirrel actually barking at my cat. And I'm just looking at this cat, the way that they are just so confident. I mean, he's just laying down there, twitching his tail. It just looks so smug.
That's what's hilarious about them. There's a barn cat, where my horse is boarded, and I love this cat. He's the coolest cat, like no dog. And there are healers there. That's the dogs that I have are Australian healers. So these are, very, healers. They can handle a horse. They can handle a steer. They can, but they do not muss or fuss with this cat. Let me tell you. And he'll invite you in to scratch his belly, and then, please don't be fooled, people, because all he wants to do is to then rabbit kick your forearm, make you bleed out, and lick himself while you're, that's all.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cats are, they do their own thing. The dogs, a lot of times they're there to please, and they are just, whatever you want, I just want to be with you. And the cats just, sometimes they're like that and sometimes they're not. They're just so unpredictable. But anyway, to your point about, like a cat either loving or hating you, I think that they do that with everybody. Okay. They have pretty strong reactions, but yeah, more so to somebody that might be an alpha and especially too, if they're like territorial. So my cat really, really likes me. I work from home. And so when I step outside, he's really, really great. But then he's actually my husband's cat. My husband has always wanted a cat since a child. And he finally was able to get this cat that he wanted in marriage. So
my ex-husband steals the love of cats from me. It's just happens. They just love him. And so I've only had one cat in all the animals that we've had, all the cats we've had over the years. I've only had one cat. Her name was 8 Ball. This cat was my cat. And we've had, I don't know, 50 cats that have wandered in and out of our lives. And this cat literally if I was in the shower, the cat was standing on the top of the glass shower door, batting at my hair. This cat followed me everywhere. It was the only time that I've had my own cat. Every other one leaves me emotionally for my ex-husband.
Wow. So there's some stuff there.
There might be some issues with resentment that other cats pick up on. That could be it. We just had a therapeutic moment right now. That's probably really what it is.
Wow. Yeah. There it is. There it is. Yeah. No, my husband is the cat person too. And so like I said, when my cat loves me most of the time, but when my husband is around,
forget it.
He's like, this is my person.
Yeah.
Don't talk to me.
I used to look at my ex-husband and I'd be like, why don't you pet me that way? He's like just into massaging this cat and the cat is just in heaven. And I'm like, I'm seriously getting jealous of all the attention you give the cats.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And not only that, like when the same situation with my husband, if we put the dogs out and let the cat in, and he's like laying on my husband, we're sitting on this couch together and I just look over and the cat's just like purring and smug and twitching his tail, just like he's doing at that squirrel, and his eyes will narrow at me. And I'm like, I am really sorry. I'm just going to go over in the kitchen or something.
Yeah.
Because giving me that look
from this situation.
Yeah. So I don't know. I've got to figure out how to wield the power of the cat or something.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, animals just in general are fascinating. But how do you, when you're working with someone and they're dealing with severe grief over a pet, which is, our society is better than it used to be about that for sure. The fact that there are actual programs of study, like at the University of Colorado, that are just around pets and grief says a lot about where we're going, but it's still not completely accepted. And, I had 2 dogs die this year, and, it's extremely emotional. This creature has become part of your family, and society still doesn't really accept that you need grieving time around that.
Right.
How do you work with clients to really help them go through the grieving process? Because I know the way we ignore our emotions and ignore our needs, then you end up grieving about it 6 months later, but you don't understand what's wrong with you and you think you're crazy. And it's really just that you didn't grieve at the time you needed to. So how do you pick that up as a therapist?
Right. Yeah. So, that's something that's really near and dear to me, to the point that with the help of CertaPet, I started a pet loss support group. So if anybody is listening and needs to refer a client or wants to join the group itself, just, message me. But I started that because pet grief is a different kind of demon. I mean, it's something that's a lot of people that haven't experienced it don't understand. And a lot of times we hear people saying, well, at least it was just a dog, or at least it was just a cat. And the thing is that right there is so hard for people to hear, just because, animals are different for us, just because they're so vulnerable and unconditional. And so, and not only that, most of the time they have been with us when we're in our most vulnerable places. Absolutely. Or where we're at our most raw. When we have another person, even if it's somebody really close to us, like a spouse or a family member or a great friend, when we're experiencing loss, we clean it up. That's just human nature. We clean
Yes.
it up. We have real raw moments around our animals. And then and through that experience too, holding the animal reacts, because when we're having those big emotional reactions, we're putting off neurotransmitters and chemical signals. So the animal's having a reaction, usually wanting to comfort us in some way.
Yeah.
And so, those are moments of really deep bonding. I refer often to animals as our secret holders, just because they see us in our most raw, vulnerable times. And so, I started this pet loss support group just because I think that a big part of healing is surrounding yourself with other people that understand, and they're not going to, and you don't have to clean it up for somebody else. When I lost my dogs a couple years ago, it was really kind of hard, because I just wanted to have that big emotional outburst that you would normally have, if a family member died or something. But I also knew that people would say, well, it's just a dog. So you clean it up. Well, making a space for people to actually express those feelings and have those feelings, I think that's really, really important. And then
And to be
just as a
validated.
therapist, individually, one-on-one, exactly. That was exactly is validating and saying, I hear you, and it's okay. It's okay to be this sad, because you're never going to get over something if you keep burying it or,
Right.
cleaning it up. We're not going to get over it.
I was just thinking, oh my gosh, and I'm not going to go into it because I literally will start crying, but I I probably wound up joining the group myself, because as much as I know this stuff, I really didn't properly grieve about Miles
Mm-hmm.
and his sister that just passed away 6 months later. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll speak shut up now, because I will
Yeah.
start crying and it'll end up being a therapy session.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. We don't give ourselves permission to have those feelings, and think about, as a human being, how many times over the course of your lifetime, or even in just one day, are you denying your feelings?
Exactly. And that's, and especially about something as rough as grief, telling us this is, and having other people tell us this is how you should grieve because it's a dog.
Mhm.
This
Right.
is how you should grieve because it's just a cat. And we have people walking all over with invisible scars all the time. This is just another layer of that.
Right.
And as soon as we can start acknowledging and saying, hey, yeah, this is something that's real. It's something that hurts, and it's something that's, deep. And, the other piece of that too is there's a lot of other emotions attached to that animal, not just the fact that they're gone. I think about my own personal journey with my dog. And when I lost the dog, it wasn't just their companionship, but it kind of brings up all of those other things that you've been through with that animal.
Yeah.
I transitioned to adulthood with that dog. I learned how to be an adult. I learned, when my husband was deployed, that dog was the only consistency I ever had. And so it almost felt like when I lost my dog, it wasn't just like, oh, I lost my companion. Like all of these times that we had together that I needed support, you were the only consistency that I had there. You can get on the phone, you can call family members and friends, but when you hang up the phone, who's right there next to me? It
Yeah.
was my dog, Asher. And so when they pass, all of those things come flooding back. All of those hard, quiet times that people don't see or don't hear about or don't talk about, those come up for us again. And that can be a flood of emotion. So it's really hard.
Yes, I'm having a hard time holding it together just hearing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, oof. Yeah, the amount of
Yeah.
times that my dog Layla, who just passed away 2 weeks ago, laid
Mm-hmm.
with me when I was
Mm-hmm.
so depressed I couldn't get out of bed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's, I think, where it really comes down to are those, that rawness, that vulnerability that we have that we're not allowed to have
Right.
with other people, because we got to clean it up.
Yep.
We got to pull up our big kid pants and be adults and, shove some of those things down. I think that, the mental health stigma is getting better,
Right.
but being
Long way to
told
go.
what you can't, but being told what you can and cannot get upset about, that right there is, now it's like the mental health discrimination piece. This you can get upset about, but this isn't such a big deal. I always like to use that metaphor when people say, you could have it so much worse. I hate it when people say that.
Oh, so
that
unhelpful.
Does not help anything, because the thing is, we understand that what you've gone through, what you've been through, is bad. But let me tell you about somebody that had it worse. How is that helpful? How did that ever become a thing?
And we do that to ourselves anyway. I'll find myself doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I will, say something or think something and then think, okay, you're getting a little victim-y here, or you're getting a little, like we edit and police ourselves even in our own heads. So, and society's doing that as well. And then you have, social media on top of it, which is its own horrific epidemic where everything is shiny and pretty and positive and one-dimensional. And so, you're combating that constant influx of what's coming at you with not feeling like you're shiny and happy and all that stuff that goes on. That's a whole other conversation. But it ain't easy being human, and animals are here to help us have this human experience, and our job is to take care of them and love them while they're helping us, is how I look at them anyway.
Absolutely. I think they're just a wonderful example for us on, hey, you want a lesson on how to be unconditional? There it is.
Yes.
It's a living example on a daily basis. So I love that saying. I strive to be the person that my dog thinks I am. I love that saying. So
absolutely. Well, tell our listeners where they can find out more about you.
All right. Yeah, I have a Facebook page. It's Prairie Conlon, CONLON @ Journeys with Prairie. I have an Instagram as well, just Prairie Conlon. And I have a website, www.journeyswithprairie.com. And I love to hear from everybody and see their animals. And so really looking forward to spending time with everybody and exploring all of the unique different forms of animal therapy that are out there.
Yeah.
And going to cover some really cool stories about how animals have impacted people or made a difference. And so, that's what we have to look forward to.
Absolutely. And listeners, you can find The Animal Effect on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, anywhere, you can download and listen to podcasts, you can find it. And you can also go to the website at theanimaleffect.com, which is on Mental Health News Radio Network. And there we'll have all of Prairie's contact information as well. So thank you so much again, Prairie, for coming on this journey and being part of our network.
Absolutely. I'm so excited. Thanks, Kristin.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to The Animal Effect on Mental Health News Radio Network and Mental Health News Radio.
I know, no one likes commercials, but seriously, folks, without the help from these organizations, we could not stay on the air. Please give a shout out to zencharts.com. If you're a mental health or addiction treatment center, you'll want to use their EHR. It's gorgeous, and they're just good people. And also MyGenetics, MyGenetx.com, because knowing your genetic code empowers your mental health treatment. And lastly, CopeNotes.com. We love getting positive messages right to our phones every day from Johnny Crowder. He's the lead singer of Prison, a heavy metal band sharing their music about suicide prevention, addiction recovery, and mental health. See, that was painless. Support them as they support us. Back to the show.
Sometimes I'm passive aggressive, but never without good intentions. I heat up and act on my emotions.
Thanks so much for listening to Mental Health News Radio. Our podcast can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, and hundreds of other podcast apps, or you can visit our website at mentalhealthnewsradio.com. If you have a question or would like to be a guest, become a podcaster on our network, or join the amazing organizations that help keep us on the air, please email us at info@mhnrnetwork.com. Get ready for that special goodbye from our resident therapy dog, Miles, and a special thanks to Emily Sohn for letting us use her incredible song, Cordial, for our podcast music. Listen to the full song on SoundCloud at emily.sonne.
Don't be surprised when I don't hate on you. After all, we promised we'd be cordial. Sometimes in you I can fight it.
Good boy.